watching us. Look at the data I collected in here. We have to use it carefully.
A judge passing sentence. Maybe public speaking isn't for everyone. Kayla froze. Her cheeks burned, not from shame, but anger. The entire room seemed to shrink, every eye silently judging, waiting. A whisper of laughter brushed past her ear. She clenched her notebook, its leather cover pressing against her palm. Words, rehearsed and polished, felt trapped behind her teeth. She wanted to argue, to stand up, but the weight of authority pinned her down. "Let's move on," Mr. Benson said, flipping the page with a flick that felt like a final blow. His tone said, "I decide who belongs here." Kayla's jaw tightened. A storm flickered behind her eyes, barely contained. She could feel the hum of injustice vibrating in the walls, hear it in the shuffling of other students' feet, in the soft, stifled gasps. The bell rang. Relief. No. The humiliation clung to her like smoke. She wanted to vanish, but something inside whispered louder, "You're stronger than this." She glanced at the classroom door, heart racing, words burning in her mind, knowing this wasn't the end. Not today. Not ever. And as she stepped out, her phone buzzed with an email notification, something that could change everything. Cliffhanger, what is the email? How will it change her fight? The classroom smelled faintly of old books and polished wood. Kayla's fingers tapped nervously on the edge of her desk, her notebook open but empty. Mr. Benson's eyes swept the room, a silent ruler checking his kingdom. "Kayla," he said, leaning over her shoulder, "you're too emotional." A hush fell over the class. Her stomach twisted. She wanted to argue, to say the words she had practiced so many nights, but something in his gaze held her down. "Too emotional," she whispered, disbelief threading her voice. "Yes," he replied, flipping her paper with a casual flick. "Public speaking isn't for everyone. Maybe try debate later." The words stung, sharper than she expected. Around her, classmates exchanged glances, some sympathetic, some barely hiding smirks. A whisper of laughter brushed past her ear, soft but cutting. Kayla's notebook pressed into her palm, pages fluttering like trapped birds. Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to defend herself, but the weight of authority pinned her words. Her voice felt small, insignificant, swallowed by the room. "Move on," Mr. Benson said, and with that, the moment ended, or so he thought. Kayla clenched her jaw. Something simmered inside, a quiet flame of anger and hurt. It wasn't just about her speech. It was about being dismissed, underestimated, silenced. The injustice hummed in her ears. She imagined herself standing on stage, words flowing with power, eyes shining with conviction. The thought comforted her, even as fear knotted in her chest. She could feel the sting of humiliation now, but she also felt determination creeping in, slow but steady. When the bell rang, relief should have washed over her. Instead, the humiliation lingered, heavy and smoky. Kayla rose from her chair, shoulders squared despite the shame. She walked toward the door, the murmur of her peers trailing behind like ghosts. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Tentatively, she pulled it out. An email notification glimmered on the screen. Regional National Speech Competition, invitation to apply. Kayla blinked, heart leaping. Could this be the chance to prove herself? Her fingers hovered over the screen. Doubt gnawed at her. What if I fail? What if Mr. Benson is right? A voice interrupted her thoughts. "You'll probably just embarrass yourself, Kayla," whispered a classmate, a sly smirk playing on his lips. The words stung, but they no longer pinned her down. The ember inside flickered into life. She stared at the email again. The opportunity stared back, silent but powerful. One click could open a door, one that led beyond the classroom, beyond ridicule, beyond Mr. Benson's dismissive gaze. Kayla's pulse quickened. Fear tangled with hope. She thought of all the nights spent practicing, the speeches rehearsed in secret, the words that felt trapped behind her teeth. Maybe it was time to unleash them. Her friend, Tasha, nudged her as she packed her bag. "You're thinking about it, aren't you?" she asked, eyes wide with curiosity and encouragement. Kayla nodded slowly. I might. I think it's time." Tasha smiled, small but steady. "Then do it. Don't let anyone tell you how you should feel or speak." The bell rang again, this time for dismissal. Kayla stepped into the hallway, her phone clutched tightly, the weight of choice pressing against her chest. The email was more than just an invitation. It was a challenge, a test of courage, a whisper of destiny. As she walked through the crowded hallway, a sense of purpose replaced the sting of humiliation. Her heartbeat synced with the rhythm of possibility. And though Mr. Benson's words echoed faintly behind her, they could no longer chain her. She glanced at her phone one last time, fingers hovering over apply now. The future waited. And Kayla, finally, was ready to face it. Kayla stared at her phone, the email glowing like a promise in her palm. Regional National Speech Competition, invitation to apply. Her fingers trembled, hovering over the Apply Now button. What if it's a mistake? She muttered under her breath. Doubt coiled around her like smoke. Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I'll embarrass myself again. Thinking about it. Tasha's voice startled her. She looked up to see her friend leaning against the locker beside her, a supportive grin tugging at her lips. I don't know, Kayla admitted, voice tight. What if I fail? What if Mr. Benson is right? Maybe I am too emotional. Tasha shook her head, impatient. Kayla, stop listening to him. You know your speeches, your words, they matter. Don't let him, or anyone, decide your worth. Kayla swallowed, the flutter in her chest turning into a determined rhythm. She thought of every time she'd stayed up late, practicing alone in her room, recording herself, rewriting paragraphs until the words sounded like truth. She had a fire inside that no teacher could snuff out. Her phone buzzed again. Another notification from the competition. Deadline to apply is in 48 hours. Don't miss your chance. Time pressed against her, urgency slicing through her fear. The hallway felt smaller, louder, every passing student a reminder of her invisible cage. That night, Kayla sat at her desk, notebook open, pens scattered like soldiers waiting for orders. She wrote her application essay, each word a rebellion, each sentence a statement. I am here. I have something to say. Her little brother peeked in. You're really doing this? He asked, eyes wide. Kayla nodded. Yeah. It's scary, but I can't let fear decide for me. He grinned. Then go show them how amazing you are. The next morning at school, whispers followed her like shadows. She's entering the big competition, a student said, smirking. Good luck, Kayla, though you'll probably cry again. Kayla ignored the jab, focusing on the rhythm of her own heartbeat. Every whisper, every sneer, only made her resolve sharper. Later, she met with Ms. Rivera, the school's speech coach, in the small, cluttered office filled with trophies and framed certificates. You've got talent, Ms. Rivera said, eyes scanning Kayla's writing. I've watched you grow. Don't let anyone tell you your emotions are a weakness, they are your strength. Kayla smiled, small but real. For the first time in weeks, she felt seen. I think I can do this, she whispered. Ms. Rivera leaned back, considering her. Then you will. But it won't be easy. There will be bias. Judges who dismiss passion. Competitors who underestimate you. You have to be ready. Kayla nodded, determination settling into her bones like armor. She imagined standing on stage, voice steady, eyes clear, commanding the room, not just speaking, but being heard. At lunch, she faced another obstacle. The school counselor, Mr. Green, frowned at her. Are you sure about this? It's a regional-level competition. Tough crowd. You might want to reconsider. Kayla's chest tightened. I'm sure, she said firmly. I need to try. I can't let fear or doubt, yours or anyone else's, stop me. He raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. Just be careful. She left the counselor's office, tension coiling in her stomach, fear whispering doubts, but a deeper, louder voice countered it. You are ready. You've always been ready. After school, she and Tasha sat under the big oak tree behind the gym. The leaves rattled in the wind, the late afternoon sunlight warm against their faces. Tasha nudged her. So, you're really going to apply? Kayla nodded, a spark of excitement mingling with nerves. Yes, and I'm going to prepare like never before. I'll face anyone who doubts me, anyone who says I'm too emotional. I'll show them. Tasha smiled, pulling out her phone. Then let's plan. Speech practice, strategy, mock audiences. You'll crush it. Kayla laughed softly, the sound shaky but freeing. The flame of determination inside her grew brighter. Fear and doubt still lurked at the edges, but for the first time, they felt like challenges she could overcome. That night, before bed, Kayla opened her email again. A new notification appeared. Confirm participation and submit your essay by midnight. Her finger hovered over the button. The weight of choice pressed down, but this time, it felt different. Empowering. The first step toward proving herself. toward rewriting the narrative that had tried to silence her. Kayla clicked submit. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. A reply, application received. Welcome to the regional speech competition. Your journey begins now. Kayla's eyes widened. Her heart thudded. The fire inside flared, uncontainable now. She had stepped into the arena, and there was no turning back. Cliffhanger. Will Kayla's courage hold when microaggressions and biases start appearing in the competition? How will she handle the first tests of authority and peer skepticism? The next morning, Kayla stepped into the school auditorium, the scent of polished wood and faint stage dust filling her nose. Rows of empty chairs stretched before her like a challenge, waiting to see if she belonged. Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged her notes on the podium. The bright fluorescent lights made her palms sweat. Around her, a few peers gathered, whispering. Some curiosity, some skepticism. Seriously, a classmate muttered under his breath. You think you can beat the others? You're, emotional. Kayla's jaw tightened. She took a deep breath, gripping the edge of the podium like a lifeline. Emotional. Maybe. But that emotion is strength. Ms. Rivera approached, clipboard in hand. Ignore them, she said firmly. Focus on your voice, your words. Let them see who you really are. Kayla nodded, forcing a small smile. But the auditorium wasn't just filled with peers, it was filled with judgment, subtle and sharp. Whispers followed her as she rehearsed her opening lines. Next, a student with a smug smile said, stepping up before her. Kayla watched, notes clutched to her chest. The boy delivered his speech with practiced confidence, glancing at her occasionally with a smirk, as if her presence threatened him. When it was finally her turn, Kayla stepped forward. The podium felt heavy beneath her hands. She glanced at the judges, a panel of 3 adults, one scribbling notes, one tapping a pen impatiently, and the third, a woman with an unreadable expression. Your time, the judge said, her tone clipped. Kayla swallowed. Words swirled in her mind, rehearsed but trembling. She opened her mouth. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, voice soft at first, trembling like the edge of a storm. I stand before you today to speak not just with words, but with truth. The whispers in the audience didn't fade. A few students snickered quietly. One rolled her eyes. Mr. Green, the counselor, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, face unreadable. Kayla faltered, a flush rising to her cheeks. Her throat tightened. Doubt clawed at her confidence. Too emotional. Not enough. The words of Mr. Benson echoed in her ears. She gritted her teeth, letting the fire inside her push past the fear. She straightened her shoulders. Each word now carried weight, each sentence sharpened with resolve. I have faced doubt, she continued, voice growing stronger, and I have faced those who believe passion is a weakness. But I have learned that our emotions are proof of our courage, our commitment, and our humanity. A murmur of surprise ran through the room. A few students leaned in. Even the judges paused. But then, a new obstacle. One of the judges whispered something to the other, a subtle frown, a small shake of the head. Kayla couldn't hear the words, but the body language was clear. Skepticism, dismissal. Her pulse raced. She glanced at Ms. Rivera, who gave a small, encouraging nod. Kayla inhaled deeply, channeling every ounce of frustration, fear, and determination. And today, she said, voice rising with conviction, I choose to speak, not just for myself, but for everyone silenced, underestimated, and dismissed. Because our voices matter. Because our truth matters. And because no one, no teacher, no peer, no system, can tell us that our hearts make us weak. A silence fell. Then, faint applause from the supportive few, quickly swallowed by the room's collective tension. Backstage, Kayla exhaled shakily. Ms. Rivera met her with a proud smile. You held your ground, she said. You showed them what they tried to hide, strength behind emotion. But the challenge wasn't over. Outside, whispers followed her. The smug classmate who had mocked her earlier muttered, lucky judges, that one. She's persuasive, but don't think it'll last. Kayla's heart thudded. She felt the weight of every biased glance, every whisper of doubt, every institutional obstacle. The path ahead was fraught, and yet, she knew this was only the beginning. Later that afternoon, Kayla received another email from the competition organizers. Schedule your practice rounds. Note, judges may have preferences. Be prepared. Her fingers hovered over the email, tension knotting in her stomach. The rules were simple, but bias was invisible, hidden behind polite words and clipped tones. Tasha nudged her in the cafeteria. They are trying to test you, she said. Ignore the whispers. You're ready. Kayla nodded, determination coiling tighter inside her. She had faced doubt, humiliation, and subtle racism today, but she had also proven to herself that emotion could be power. As she packed her bag that evening, she realized something vital. The first trial wasn't just the competition. It was survival against prejudice, against dismissal, against every person who assumed she was less because of her passion, her expression, her very being. And the next round. She knew it would test her even more. Cliffhanger. Will Kayla survive the next round of competition, facing biased judges and competitive peers? How will she turn emotion into unshakable power? The auditorium smelled of polished wood, stage lights, and nervous anticipation. Kayla's pulse quickened as she stepped into the venue, the echo of footsteps bouncing off high ceilings. Hundreds of chairs were already filling with students, parents, and teachers from neighboring districts. The air buzzed with quiet chatter, the undercurrent of competition sharp and electric. Kayla clutched her folder tightly. Each sheet of paper felt heavier than the last, carrying not just her words, but her reputation, her pride, and her resilience. Her palms were damp, but she refused to wipe them. Sweat was easier to own than fear. Tasha squeezed her shoulder. You've got this, she whispered. Just breathe, speak, and let them see you. Kayla nodded, though doubt prickled at the edges. This wasn't her familiar classroom anymore. Here, judges had reputations, connections, and biases. Here, authority wasn't just a teacher's word, it was institutional power. Her name was called. She stepped forward, eyes scanning the audience. Whispers floated past, some supportive, some skeptical. One boy from her school muttered, loud enough for her to hear, she's emotional. Hope she doesn't mess it up. Kayla's stomach twisted. The words stung, but instead of faltering, they sharpened her focus. They don't define me. I define me. She approached the podium, noticing every detail. The polished wood, the microphones with their hum, the judges' expressions, one leaning back with folded arms, another frowning slightly, and the third glancing down at notes, lips pressed tight. The timer clicked down. Kayla inhaled deeply. Her first line came out soft, almost fragile. Good afternoon. Today, I want to speak not just with words, but with the truth of our experiences. She felt a twitch of doubt, the urge to falter. A judge scribbled something on a pad, pen scratching like a tiny drumbeat against her heartbeat. Kayla paused, then continued, letting the words roll like water over rocks, smooth and deliberate, yet filled with the energy of all she had carried. Audience reactions were subtle but telling. A whisper of surprise, a slight lean forward, a skeptical glance. Every micro-expression carried weight, doubt, curiosity, bias. Kayla adjusted her stance, shoulders square, voice steadying. Halfway through, a peer competitor muttered under his breath, audible only to her, "Don't overdo it. You'll cry again." Her fingers gripped the podium tighter. She remembered Mr. Benson's words, the dismissive laughter of her classmates, the weight of years of small, quiet prejudice. And she laughed, internally, fiercely. They underestimate me. I'll show them. She projected her voice, each word deliberate, emotional, commanding attention. Being emotional isn't weakness. It's awareness. It's passion. It's courage. And it's how we create change. Some judges nodded subtly. Others stayed impassive. Kayla noticed, acknowledged, and moved forward, letting conviction guide her delivery. Then a shift, a camera flashed in the audience. A journalist, perhaps, recording the speech. Murmurs rose, some impressed, some skeptical. Kayla didn't flinch. She let the gaze of the unseen audience fuel her strength. But the tension wasn't over. The timer beeped faintly, signaling she had only a minute left. Her throat burned, her voice hoarse, but determination surged. She spoke faster, sharper, hitting every emotional beat, every pause designed to pierce through doubt. And if we remain silent, we let injustice thrive. But if we speak, even with trembling hearts, we ignite hope. We demand recognition. We demand change. The room fell silent. Even the skeptical judges paused. Kayla exhaled, letting the stillness wash over her. The applause was polite, cautious, but it was there. A nod from a judge, a subtle but profound acknowledgement, made her chest swell. Backstage, Kayla's hands shook as Ms. Rivera met her with a proud smile. You did it. You owned the stage. Tasha ran up, eyes bright. You were amazing. Did you see their faces? Kayla shook her head, feeling the adrenaline recede. But doubt crept back in. This was only the beginning. Bias was subtle, insidious. Winning over the audience was one thing. Winning over the judges, the system, and herself would take more. Her phone buzzed. Another email. Practice rounds schedule updated. Be prepared for unexpected pairings and judges' preferences. Kayla stared at the screen, tension knotting in her stomach. They are testing me. Trying to unsettle me. But I can't let them win. She exhaled, letting her shoulders drop. Fear and doubt were still there, but so was purpose. Every glance, every whisper, every judgment, she would turn into fuel for her performance. She would survive, and she would thrive. The regional stage was no longer just a place to speak. It was a battlefield of perception, bias, and courage. Kayla stepped forward, aware that every choice she made now carried consequences, not just for the competition, but for herself, for every person who had been dismissed as too emotional, and for the truth she was determined to voice. Cliffhanger. Will Kayla's voice pierce through bias and skepticism in the next practice round? How will she handle judges' favoritism and subtle intimidation tactics? The competition hall was hushed, anticipation thick in the air. Kayla stepped onto the stage, the bright lights making her sweat beads glint like tiny stars. Every eye was on her, students, judges, teachers, and parents. Some curious, some skeptical, some expecting her to falter. Her notebook lay closed at the podium. Tonight, she would speak from memory, from heart. The microphone hummed as she leaned in. "Good evening," she began, voice steady despite the tight knot in her stomach. "Tonight, I want to speak about truth. About courage. About the power of voices that are often dismissed as too emotional." A faint whisper rippled through the audience. She caught a glance from one judge, a slight frown, eyebrows knitting together, but she held her gaze forward. Kayla inhaled. For too long, society tells us that passion is weakness, that speaking with feeling is a flaw. But emotion is proof of life, of empathy, of strength. And we cannot be silenced. A murmur ran through the hall. A rival competitor rolled her eyes, nudging the boy next to her. Kayla ignored them. Their doubt would not dictate her rhythm. She paused, letting the words settle, letting the tension linger. Every microsecond was intentional. Every breath a declaration, "I am here. I belong." Then came the subtle sabotage. A judge leaned over and whispered something to another, just audible enough for Kayla to catch. "She's dramatic." Her heart skipped, but she didn't falter. Instead, she smiled faintly, letting that whispered judgment fuel her delivery. "And yes," she said, voice rising with conviction, "we may be called dramatic. Too sensitive. Too emotional. But our words, our stories, carry truth. And truth cannot be ignored." The audience shifted. Some leaned in, captivated. Some whispered, skeptical but intrigued. Kayla let her eyes sweep the room, landing on each judge for a beat longer than polite, forcing acknowledgement without confrontation. Her voice strengthened, filling every corner of the hall. "I have faced doubt from teachers, peers, and even systems that claim fairness while perpetuating bias. I have been underestimated, dismissed, and told my voice isn't strong enough. But tonight, I speak not for approval, but for justice, for recognition, for everyone who has been silenced." A ripple of applause ran through a section of the audience. She noticed it, allowed herself a small surge of confidence, but did not break focus. She could feel tension tightening in other parts of the hall, the judge tapping impatiently, a student smirking, a teacher shifting uneasily in the front row. Kayla's heart pounded. Every word now carried stakes beyond the competition. Every phrase challenged the subtle, insidious bias she faced daily. "And so, I challenge us all," she said, voice ringing clear and unwavering, "to recognize emotion as strength, to honor courage as power, and to listen, not just with ears, but with understanding, empathy, and justice." The room fell silent for a heartbeat, heavy with thought, heavy with tension. Then, hesitant applause grew, uneven but growing. Kayla's chest swelled. She had reached them, at least some of them. But the challenge wasn't over. One judge scribbled notes furiously, shaking his head slightly, lips pressed tight. Another whispered to a colleague, their body language unmistakably dismissive. The third maintained a neutral mask, inscrutable. Backstage, Ms. Rivera's eyes glimmered with pride. "You commanded the stage," she whispered. "No one can say you weren't heard." Tasha grabbed Kayla's hand, beaming. They didn't know what hit them. You were amazing. Kayla exhaled slowly, letting adrenaline fade into a mix of relief and residual tension. This victory felt fragile, temporary, subject to the bias and favoritism that still lurked unseen. Her phone buzzed. Another email from the organizers. Feedback will be provided to judges before final decision. Note, additional evaluation may be required for scoring inconsistencies. Kayla frowned. The warning implied more than routine procedure: subtle favoritism, potential bias checks, behind-the-scenes influence. The next stage would test not just her skill, but her resilience under scrutiny. That evening, at home, she replayed every line, every pause, every reaction. Doubts crept in, fear lingered, but so did the undeniable truth. She had spoken, and she had been heard. Her brother peeked in. "So, did you nail it?" Kayla smiled softly. "I spoke my truth. That's what matters. But the real test isn't over yet." Tasha texted her. "Judge's bias is real. But you turned emotion into power. Keep fighting." Kayla stared at the message, feeling a mix of exhaustion and determination. She had faced public scrutiny, bias, and subtle microaggressions, but she had also discovered a deeper strength within herself. As night fell, she stared at the ceiling, heart still racing. Tomorrow would bring reviews, rankings, whispers, and challenges. The system had not changed. Authority still loomed. Peers would still judge. Bias would still whisper. But Kayla had found her voice. And she wasn't done yet. Cliffhanger: will Kayla's voice survive the next round of systemic bias and favoritism? Can she maintain composure under scrutiny and prove that emotion is strength? The next morning, Kayla arrived at the competition center early. The room smelled of fresh coffee, printer ink, and nervous ambition. Students milled about, rehearsing lines, pacing, adjusting outfits. The air buzzed with anticipation. But Kayla sensed an undercurrent she hadn't noticed before: subtle alliances, whispers, and the invisible weight of favoritism. Ms. Rivera met her by the registration desk. "They've shuffled the practice rounds," she said, frowning. "Some judges seem to have favorites. You'll have to stay alert." Kayla nodded, the unease settling in her chest. She had faced biased teachers, dismissive peers, even skeptics. But systemic favoritism was another beast entirely. One she had to navigate carefully. Her first pairing was a rival competitor, Ethan, known for his confident speeches and family connections within the education board. He smirked as she approached the podium. "Heard you stirred things up yesterday," he said, voice dripping with condescension. "Try not to cry this time, okay?" Kayla's jaw clenched. She let the comment wash over her, then responded calmly, "I'll let my words speak for themselves." The round began. Kayla delivered her practice speech with precision, injecting every pause and gesture with intention. Judges whispered among themselves, some frowning, some scribbling notes. A subtle hierarchy of preference became clear. A few students received extra time, slight hints of encouragement, even subtle coaching in private corners. When it was her turn for feedback, one judge leaned in. "Your delivery is strong," he said, voice low and clipped. "But consider toning the emotion slightly. Judges prefer neutrality." Kayla felt a familiar burn of frustration. Neutrality. Her passion was her strength. Silence almost seemed to laugh at her. But she nodded, taking the words as data, not verdicts. Behind the scenes, a student whispered, "They are setting it up for someone else. Don't bother too much." Kayla's pulse quickened, a storm brewing inside. The unfairness was palpable, threaded into the very structure of the competition. She could feel it in the timing of her turns, the subtle gestures of judges, even the way certain students were given extra guidance. She exhaled and whispered to herself, "I can't control them. I can only control me." The next practice round brought another challenge. Kayla noticed a minor discrepancy. A peer had been given additional visual aids while her slides had been restricted. She hesitated. Should she complain? Draw attention to herself? Risk being seen as difficult? Ms. Rivera leaned over. "It's unfair," she said softly. "But fighting now might backfire. Focus on your strength, your voice, your presence, your words." Kayla nodded, taking a deep breath. She adjusted her stance, squared her shoulders, and delivered the next speech. Her voice was unwavering, projecting not just words, but resilience. Every subtle bias, every microaggression, only fueled her determination. During a short break, she overheard the judges discussing a particular competitor with connections. "They have potential," one whispered. "But make sure we're fair in our scoring." Kayla clenched her fists beneath the table. "Fair? she muttered to herself. There's nothing fair about this. Her phone buzzed. A text from Tasha. Don't let them shake you. You're stronger than their rules. She typed back quickly. I won't. But it's more than skill now. It's navigation. Survival. The day wore on, each round revealing more invisible battles, a shuffled schedule, a whisper in the hallway, a suggestion to adjust tone from an authority figure. Each micro-twist tested not just her speech skills but her patience, resolve, and understanding of the system. By late afternoon, Kayla sat alone backstage, notebook open but untouched. Her pulse had slowed, but the tension lingered. She thought of all the teachers who had underestimated her, the peers who mocked her, the subtle barriers that tried to hold her down. And yet, despite everything, she had survived. Ms. Rivera appeared with a small smile. You're learning more than just public speaking, she said. You're learning how to maneuver through unfair systems, and that will matter more than you think. Kayla nodded, feeling a quiet surge of pride. She realized the competition was no longer just about winning, it was about integrity, resilience, and turning injustice into fuel. As she packed her bag, a new email appeared on her phone. Semifinal schedule updated. Judges will review all prior performances. Note, scoring anomalies may require additional review rounds. Kayla's eyes narrowed. The stakes had escalated. Bias was no longer just a whisper, it was a visible, systemic force she would have to face head-on. But she also knew something vital. Her words, her voice, her truth, could not be silenced by invisible games or favoritism. She had survived the first wave of unseen battles, and she would rise stronger for the next. Cliffhanger. Will Kayla confront the judge's subtle favoritism or find another way to claim justice? How will she maintain her integrity and strength in the semifinals? The finals hall was silent, anticipation hanging like a heavy curtain. Kayla stepped onto the stage, heart pounding, palms slightly damp. She had faced bias, favoritism, and subtle sabotage, but now it was her moment to claim victory. Judges sat poised, expressions unreadable but tense. Kayla felt their gaze like a tangible force, assessing every nuance, every breath. She adjusted the microphone, closed her eyes briefly, and drew a deep, steadying breath. Good evening, she began, voice calm yet charged with conviction. Tonight, I speak not just for myself, but for every person who has been underestimated, dismissed, or told they are too emotional. Tonight, I speak for truth, for courage, and for justice. The audience was rapt. Kayla felt their energy, the curiosity, the tension, the subtle disbelief in her poise. But she held firm, letting each word flow with deliberate clarity and emotional resonance. She wove stories of quiet prejudice, small dismissals, and subtle bias, each example a thread of truth embroidered into a larger tapestry of systemic inequity. She paused, letting the weight of each statement settle. Every eye was on her. Every whisper ceased. And yet, she continued, voice rising with power, emotion is not weakness. Passion is not a flaw. Courage is not defined by silence. We are strong because we feel. We are brave because we act. And we are unstoppable because we refuse to be invisible. Kayla's words hung in the air like sparks ready to ignite. She saw subtle nods from the previously skeptical judges. A few audience members exchanged glances, realization dawning. The room shifted, bias confronted by undeniable truth. Then came the moment of subtle poetic justice. One judge, who had been particularly dismissive during earlier rounds, cleared his throat and said quietly, "Miss Carter, your performance commands acknowledgement. Your voice cannot be ignored." A murmur of approval rippled through the audience. Kayla's chest swelled, not with arrogance, but with validation. Her resilience had broken through invisible barriers. Backstage, Ms. Rivera grinned, eyes glistening. "You did it. You made them see. That's a victory beyond scoring." Tasha hugged her fiercely. "They can't deny you now. You owned every moment." The judges conferred briefly, whispers low but intense. Moments later, the head judge stood. The room tensed. After careful review, the judge announced, voice formal but tinged with respect, "We recognize the exceptional performance of Miss Kayla Carter. She will be awarded first place in this competition." Applause erupted, some hesitant, some jubilant. Kayla felt her knees weaken slightly, emotion flooding through her, relief, pride, joy, and a deep, lingering echo of every challenge she had endured. Her phone buzzed with messages of congratulations. Teachers, friends, and family expressed admiration and pride. Even some classmates, previously dismissive, sent brief texts of acknowledgement. But the victory was bittersweet. Kayla remembered Mr. Benson's words, the whispers, the subtle dismissals, the microaggressions, and the unseen favoritism. The path had been exhausting, and the emotional toll was real. Tears pricked her eyes, not of despair, but of release. Later, in a quiet hallway, she received a message from the competition organizer. Your courage and integrity have inspired review procedures to ensure future fairness. Your performance has sparked change. Kayla exhaled slowly. The fight had extended beyond the stage. Her voice had not only earned recognition but also forced the system to confront its biases. That evening, she sat with her family. Her little brother beamed, eyes wide. You did it. You won. Kayla smiled softly. Yes, but it wasn't just about winning. It was about being heard, being recognized, and proving that emotion is strength. Her mother hugged her tightly. We're proud of you. All of it, the bravery, the words, the heart, it matters more than any trophy. As Kayla looked at the golden trophy in her hands, the applause from earlier still echoing faintly in her mind, she realized the truth. The victory was hers, but so was the cost. The late nights, the anxiety, the confrontations with authority, the microaggressions, they had shaped her. They had tested her. And she had emerged stronger, resilient, and unwavering. She thought of Mr. Benson, imagining his surprise, perhaps even a sting of regret. But that was not her concern anymore. Her concern had always been the truth, her voice, and the justice she earned. Kayla rose, holding the trophy, letting it shine in the auditorium lights. The journey had been difficult, emotional, and exhausting, but it had been worth every step. She had turned fear into courage, doubt into determination, and silence into power. Closing emotional beat. The camera would linger on Kayla's determined, proud expression, reflecting triumph, resilience, and bittersweet victory.